Hello guys, today I'm going to do a special video. This one's unrelated to anything Peabody related, but I just want to explain my desperation to fix my Sundance. So I'm going to talk about this car because I haven't really given everybody the full rundown on the 2014 Ford Focus. These cars were equipped with what's called the DPS6, or dual power shift transmission, in 2009-2010. When they were road testing and designing this particular transmission, engineers knew about potential problems with them. Ford did nothing and they sold them to people anyways. So I'm going to talk about the whole history of this car, what's been done to it, and why it's such a hopeless situation. So I purchased the car new at the dealership. I traded in my 2007 Ford Fusion. I got $4,000 for that. So after trade-in, I paid $12,960 for it. My cousin used to work at the dealership, so they worked out a deal on it. So it was like $16,000, but with the after trade-in, it was like $12,960. But early on in the car, I got into a little fender bender up in the front, and I'd always hear like this rattling noise, so I thought maybe it was like the bumper or something, but in reality it was the transmission slipping. But it was so not noticeable that nothing could be done about it. So 6 months after that, back in 2015, that's 2016, my brakes started to grind, and the car only had 40,000 miles on it. So I took it over to Just Brakes, horrible place to do business with. They're now owned by Pep Boys. They looked at it and said, yeah, you need a whole front right caliper, a rotor, and pads on the front. So they did that. It still always kind of squealed, so I ended up complaining about it. You know, the brakes wore out again. Pep Boys took care of it, no problem. They redid the brakes. Had to do them again, so they redid them a second time. But they didn't recommend, Just Brakes didn't recommend doing both rotors. So the one on the left over here wore down to the metal, and this one wasn't as worn down, but they were still both bad. So they took care of that. Had to have it done twice because the second time they didn't do it right. And as a courtesy, they did the rear rotors for me at no charge. So in, God, when was it? 2019, it was like March. Car had just under, well, now I didn't get to that. So 2018, yeah, it was October of 2018, my fuel gauge started to act all funky. It would actually increase and it would go down. Check engine light came on. I was all panicked because I thought this was going to be some kind of major repair. I come to find out it's a recall. So took it over to Camelback Ford to do the recall. That's all I needed done to it. Took it in. They ended up they had to replace the gas tank on this. There was like a couple emissions components because basically the defect causes air to suck into the fuel tank, and the fuel tank would kind of warp. That's the best way I can explain it. But they did all of that. But when I got the car back, what they were trying to pull is they were trying to pull this shit where, oh, you need this done, your control arm bushings are bad, you're leaking oil, but they wouldn't elaborate on anything, so kind of like a huge red flag. So they were trying to get me to do $1,700 in car repairs. So when I declined, I was walking out, this guy kind of nudges his way next to me in the waiting area, and he starts talking to me, small talking to me. You know, and I'm like, are you a manager? He says, I work here. And I was just asking him about the bill and why nothing was clarified. And the guy was fucking trying to sell me a car. So he literally, as I'm leaving, follows me out to my car. And I had to yell at the guy. I said, look, I'm not interested. I don't want to buy a car. This one's paid for. So, ended there. Drove the car for a few days. The check engine light comes on. So I take it back to Pep Boys. They look at it. The manager actually brings me back into the shop. He's got the car up underneath the lift, and he says, "Jess, I don't know what they did to what they were doing, but it looks like they left an evap line loose it's on the rear end of the car towards the fuel tank where they worked." So Pep Boys actually reconnected the evap line. They took pictures of it and everything. They emailed it to me. They actually genuinely felt bad, and they didn't charge me anything for it because it almost looked like it was intentionally left loose or it wasn't done correctly. I do have pictures of that if anybody wants to see it, but I dealt with that. And then 4 or 5 months later, so this was like in October of 2018, and this was right around the time my father died. Back in March, my check engine light came on again. It was a transmission issue. And that's when I was doing the research on the Fords, and I saw that there were all these issues with the DPS-6, so took it to the dealership, Chapman Ford. They looked at it. They said, "Oh, it's your clutch, and you've got 2 shift actuators that were bad." They wanted $2,500 to do that job. And that's why I'm saying that one repair is easily more than what I put into the Sundance so far. So I fought with Ford over it. They ended up, they denied any type of assistance. They said, "Your car's out of warranty, your car's out of warranty." I'm like, this is just under 100,000 miles. So they ended up giving me a 50% discount. Big flipping deal. So it was like down to $1,080. Take the car in, they have it for 2 days, they don't give me a loan or nothing. So I get the car back. For some weird reason, the bill wasn't $1,080, which was what they had quoted me. It was $760. I'm not going to complain, but why is there such a big difference in the bill? What's going on here? Was there something wrong that wasn't? I'm kind of scratching my head. I don't care, but I just want to know why there was a reduction in the bill, and they never told me. So, had the car, drove it for 6 months, check engine light comes on again. Take it back to the dealership. This time, I don't have a car for like 2 days. They're backed up, they're busy. They look at it, and it was just kind of like real wishy-washy with them. The guy said, "Well, it looks like you might have an internal failure in the case, therefore it needs to be replaced." I'm flipping out. I'm going back and forth with Ford, and the guy's like, "Well, we're still looking at it. We'll let you know more tomorrow." So the following day, he calls me, the manager, and he says, "We're done with the car. It looks like it just needed an adaptive relearn," so it's like some kind of software thing. So he's like, "Tony, the porter, is going to deliver the car to you." Yada yada yada. So I'm waiting for the car. Tony comes by, and before all of this happened, so let's rewind. So before Tony drops off the car, let me just tell you, I've had some shit luck. So before I had the second transmission issue, I was stopped at a red light, a few miles down the road. And a guy, I'm not kidding you, the guy's name was Zabir Ahmed Ali, rear ends me. So he rear ends me, hits my rear end bumper and everything. As you can see, there's damage all along the side. Get it close. So he rear ends me. Fortunately, he didn't hit any metal. The car had insurance. However, Mr. Ali was not covered on the policy. The owner of the vehicle excluded him from coverage, so therefore the insurance company denied my claim, even though Ali was at fault for the accident. I took it over to Chapman Ford's auto body place, and they wanted $1,400 to do the work. So basically, bumper, rear skid plate down there, all of those going to be like $1,400 bucks. So now let's get back to Tony. Tony brings the car to me. He comes out. He looks like he's a mechanic. He's got the patch on. He's got the polo. He looks like a mechanic. So the guy comes out and he tells me, he says, "I washed your car, man, and I put your bumper back up," because the bumper was hanging and I had zip ties on it. So he popped the bumper back in place. But in reality, they're clips that hold everything together that are factory, but those clips were broken. So he's like, "Well, you can put in a good word to my boss, I appreciate it." So I did, thinking that he was a mechanic and he knew what he was doing. So a week later, after they did the adaptive relearn, check engine light comes on again, transmission issues again. This time they come out to my house, they pick up the car, they actually drop off a loaner car for me, and then they take my car to the dealership. An hour later they say it's done, it's your transmission control module. And by the way, while this is all happening, Ford extended the warranty for the clutch and to 100,000 miles, and it covered any clutch repair that was done within 100,000 miles, and mine was at 99,000 miles. So it was under that warranty, and I was fighting Ford on getting reimbursed for that money. I'd been doing this for like the last 2 years. So I fought with them, and then once this happened, they immediately said, "Oh, we'll give you back your money, the $760 that you paid." And most of that money went back into tuning up the car. I spent like another $400 doing sparks, fluid, fuel cleaning. So that was done. So they pick up the car. I think I didn't even have a loaner for 2 hours. They call me, they say, "Well, it was just your transmission control module." That was another thing that was under warranty. So they called me, they said, "Tony's bringing back the car." It should have only taken him like an hour to get the car to me. It was the middle of the day, and hour and a half goes by, almost 2 hours goes by, and I'm sitting here scratching my head, and I'm like, "Where's Tony?" And I emailed the sales advisor at the dealership, and he says, "Well, Tony must be stuck in traffic, yada yada yada." So Tony drops off the car and everything. I sign the paperwork. Following day I come out, and that bumper that was hanging down, and I had pictures of everything because after the accident I took pictures, the bumper was all fucking melted off. And what had happened was, as Tony was driving out on the freeway, the bumper came off on him and it rubbed up against the tire. So Tony took it back to the shop, and they actually put a machine screw on the side there, and they didn't even fucking tell me. So I fought with them over that. We settled up on that, and I found out that Tony wasn't even a mechanic. He's just he brings cars to and from people's house. He's not a mechanic. He shouldn't be touching people's cars. So I fought with them for 6 months over that. And then even after they replaced the control module, the car was just, I mean, it would jerk, it would buck. I mean, you accelerate and the car would literally shake. It'd sound like a machine gun. But, you know, and that went on for 2 years. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to live with this. I continue to fight Ford on every aspect of this. I got the media involved. I went to the senator's office. Nothing. They would not do anything. Better Business Bureau. I filed probably 8 separate attorney general office complaints. They really did nothing. So I'm like, I'm forced to live with this as long as I can. Over the last year, I just spent like $1,500 on this. For some weird reason, I had to replace the battery like 3 times last year. The battery should last like one battery 2 years. 3 times. And I'm assuming it had something to do with the transmission. Coolant reservoir cracked, had some hairline fractures in it. I had to replace that. I just had the brakes done. I complained to that Pep Boys about it. I said there's grinding just coming from the one side. The one side. So they looked at it, and the guy was going to make a determination whether they were going to cover the rotors you know, I said I'd pay for the pads, but, you know, they should have, you know, this should have been taken care of. And they looked at it and they said, yeah, it didn't look like they put something together right in there, so they took care of me on that. So that was all done. Then the check engine light came on again, purge valve, purge solenoid. That was another $560, labor, parts. A few weeks later, back in June, transmission notification came on saying that it was overheating, and then I got a transmission service now on it. Meanwhile, continuing to fight Ford. It's not going anywhere. I did submit a claim to the Ford transmission settlement last year. If anybody knows about that, the settlement was held up for so long in court because it was being appealed and everything, but I did not qualify for any assistance. I didn't even get a response. And when I asked about it, they didn't give me any clarity. I mean, I even harassed their lawyers. I even reached out to Capstone, Ryan Wu, all of those guys, and I got nowhere with them. No resolution. So, you know, when people say the Plymouth Sundance isn't for me, this car isn't for me. It's consumed my life for the last 2 years. This car's not even safe to drive. You can't, you know, I don't even know if I took it on the road right now if it would accelerate. I don't know if it's even going to start, but I'll start it up here and you'll hear it. It doesn't sound good at all. So we'll try to start it up and see if anything happens. Got 154,000 miles on it, so it's got a lot of mileage. It's real chattery, need to get the oil changed on it. Battery's got some corrosion. But I do not trust this car. I do not trust. Do not trust driving it on the streets. I ended up having to de-insure it, but my Plymouth Sundance, when it does run, it's more reliable than this car. I don't care what anybody says. This car is just... it's not reliable. You can hear a noise coming from the transmission. The little bleeder valve popped out. This little valve right here, I don't know if fluid came out or debris went into it, but I mean, definitely doesn't sound good. So yeah, that's the Ford Focus. Just the kind of whole backstory on it. It's a real shitty situation, but it is what it is. I didn't, you know, I had no control over this. This is what it is.